All right, so let's talk about building what we call an organizational shield. In the world we live in, information is everything. But the big question is, how do we actually protect it? And here's the thing, it's not just about firewalls and fancy software. The real key, the heart of it all, is the people. So today, we're going to break down exactly how you build that defense, that shield, and it all starts with your team. Ready? Let's jump in.
Okay, so here's what we're going to tackle today. Think of this as our game plan. By the time we're done here, you'll have everything you need to crush any exam questions on these 4 points. We're covering the whole spectrum, from just being aware of privacy all the way to specific, hands-on skills for different jobs, and even the official rules that tie it all together.
So how are we going to build this shield? Well, we'll do it step by step, layer by layer. First, we'll lay the groundwork, the real foundations of privacy awareness. Then we'll get into the fun part, designing a program and figuring out if it's actually working. After that, we'll connect the dots between just knowing about privacy and actually getting trained on it. And we'll wrap it all up with the acceptable use policy, the rule book that makes sure everyone's on the same page. Every single one of these is a key piece of our shield. All right, welcome to Act 1, laying the foundation. Any great defense has to start with a solid base, right? And when we're talking about privacy, that means we have to get real about our single biggest vulnerability. And it's probably not what you think. It's not some bug in the code or a weak spot in the network. It's people. It's us. Human behavior is the wild card in all of this, and that's exactly where we need to start. So let's kick things off with a key term, privacy awareness. The official definition is the extent to which staff understand the importance of information privacy, the level of privacy required for personal information, and their individual privacy responsibilities. Okay, so what does that actually mean in simple terms? It's more than just memorizing rules. It's about your staff getting why privacy is a big deal. It's about them feeling that sense of personal duty to protect information. Think of it this way. This is the knowing part. It's the absolute bedrock of our shield.
Okay, moving on to the next piece of the puzzle, privacy culture. Here's the definition. The extent to which staff demonstrate expected privacy behavior in line with their individual privacy responsibilities and the level of privacy required for personal information. So here's the key distinction, and you'll want to remember this. If awareness is all about knowing, then culture is all about doing. It's what people actually do when nobody's watching. It's when protecting data becomes second nature, just a reflex, for everyone, all day, every day. That's the real endgame right there.
All right, now let's dig into the human element a bit more. If you're going to build a shield, you have to know what you're protecting against, right? And it turns out there are really 3 main types of human behavior that can cause a data breach. And listen up, because this is a big one for your exam. You absolutely have to know the difference between these next 3 things. First up, we've got malicious behavior. The book says it involves a combination of motive to cause harm and a conscious decision to act inappropriately. This is the really bad stuff. We're talking about an insider, someone on the team who actively wants to cause damage. Maybe they're mad, maybe they want money. The key is they have a motive and they make a choice to do something wrong. It's 100% intentional. Next on the list is negligent behavior. This does not involve a motive to cause harm, but does involve a conscious decision to act inappropriately. Now, this one is super common. Picture this. An employee knows they're not supposed to use a personal USB stick in their work computer, but they do it anyway because it's easier. They're not trying to hurt the company, but they are consciously choosing to break a rule. That's negligence. And finally, we have accidental behavior. This does not involve a motive to harm or a conscious decision to act. This is your classic honest-to-goodness mistake, like accidentally sending an email with sensitive info to the wrong John Smith. There was no bad intent, no decision to break a rule, it just happened. And a really strong privacy culture, the one we're trying to build, helps reduce all 3 of these. Okay, moving on to Act 2, forging the shield. We've got our foundation down. We know the concepts, we know the risks. But now, how do we actually do something about it? This is where we get practical. We're going to talk about designing a real formal awareness program that will become the backbone of our defense. So, what does a good program even look like? Well, there are a few key goals. For one, you have to keep the message going all the time, not just in a once-a-year email. And you need to mix it up. Use posters, emails, meetings, whatever it takes. And this is huge. It has to be for everyone, from the top floor to the front desk, not just the tech guys. You got to cover everything. Even things like physical security or how to spot social engineering. And really, the main goal here is to build that culture we talked about. But the most important thing on the slide, the program has to be continuous, always on, always being checked, and always being improved. So what should we actually be teaching in this program?
Well, the ISO 2951 standard gives us a perfect blueprint, and it all boils down to one word: consequences. You have to make the danger of a data breach feel real to people. That means talking about what it does to the company as a whole, the very real personal harm it can cause to the people whose data gets leaked, and yeah, the personal consequences for employees if they're the ones who break the rules.
Okay, so we know what to say, but how do we get the message out there? According to NIST, a good program rests on 3 pillars. Think of these as your delivery methods. First, you have tools. These are the tangible things, like posters, events, or newsletters. Then there's communication. This is your strategy, making sure the right message hits the right people at the right time. And finally, outreach, which is about creating a central place, like a website, where people can always go to find information.
All right, we've built our shield, but is it any good? I mean, it's not enough to just create a program. We have to know if it's actually making a difference. This is where measurement comes in. And it's not just about ticking a box. It's about finding the weak spots in our shield and fixing them before an attacker does. We're still in Act 2 here, because testing the shield is a huge part of forging. Now, pay close attention to this slide. Seriously, this is a gold mine for a long-form exam question, so let's walk through it carefully. How do we measure success? Let's look at the first metric: number of security incidents. This seems obvious, right? If incidents are going down, your program is probably working. The catch? You might not have enough incidents to show a real statistically significant trend. Okay, next up, audit findings. This is great because it's an independent outside look. The downside is that an audit might not look at every single thing your program covers. How about results of staff surveys? I like these because they tell you if people are actually getting the message. But people can sometimes just tell you what they think you want to hear. The fourth one is interesting: tests of staff procedures. This is where you get proactive. Maybe you send a fake phishing email to see who clicks. It's a fantastic way to measure actual behavior, but you have to be super careful with the legal and ethical side of things. And finally, number of staff completing training. This is the simplest one to track, for sure, but it only tells you who showed up, not who actually learned anything. So what's the big takeaway here? You can't rely on just one. A really solid measurement plan uses a mix of these to get the full picture.
And that brings us to Act 3, wielding the shield. Up until now, we've been all about awareness, making sure everyone is thinking about privacy. Now we're shifting gears. We're talking about training, giving specific people the actual skills they need to use that shield and defend our data as part of their job. Okay, another classic exam question right here. You absolutely have to know the difference between awareness and training. Let's break it down. Awareness is all about the what and the why. The whole point is to get people's attention, to change how they think. And it's for everybody, all staff. Training, on the other hand, is all about the how. It's about developing very specific skills, like how to properly secure a database. The goal is to make someone better at their job, so it's for a much smaller targeted group. See the difference? One is about thinking, the other is about doing. But you can't just throw people into specialized training. You need to build a bridge. And that bridge is called Cybersecurity Essentials. Just think of it as the common ground between that general awareness stuff for everyone and the really advanced training for a select few. It just makes sure that everybody in the company is speaking the same language and understands the basic concepts before they move on to more complex stuff.
All right, let's take it up a notch. We're getting into advanced role-based training. Because let's be honest, a one-size-fits-all approach to training just doesn't work. The people on the front lines, the ones managing, designing, and operating our systems, they need specialized skills. They are our key defenders. The NIST framework gives us a really smart way to organize this by breaking things down into 4 main roles. You've got the manage role. These are the people overseeing the strategy. You've got the design role, the architects building the systems. Then there's the implement role, the people in the trenches running things day to day. And finally, the evaluate role, the ones checking to make sure it's all working. When you tailor your training to these specific roles, you make sure everyone gets exactly what they need to do their part. And this slide really brings it to life with some concrete examples from the US government. Just look at the difference. All users, they get their annual awareness training. Simple enough. But executives, they get trained on high-level policy. Program managers learn all about risk management. CIOs and security personnel get the deep dive across everything. And IT operations get that real hands-on implementation-level training. It's a perfect example of how training gets more specific and more advanced depending on your job. And that brings us to our final act. Act 4, the rules of engagement. Okay, so we've raised awareness, we've provided training. What's left? We need to put the rules down on paper in a formal document that's clear, official, and, this is the most important part, enforceable. And that document is the Acceptable Use Policy, or AUP. So what is an AUP? The official definition is an acceptable use policy, a security or privacy policy targeted at all employees that defines what behaviors are acceptable and what behaviors are not acceptable. Let's be really clear about this. This is the official rulebook for using company stuff, laptops, networks, data, you name it. It's not a friendly suggestion. It's a formal policy that every single person has to read, understand, and sign as a condition of their job. So, how do you make an AUP that people will actually follow? Well, here's a simple 5-step process. First, you do a risk assessment to figure out what you're most worried about. Second, you write the policy in plain, simple language, no jargon. Third, you get it in front of every employee and get that signature. Fourth, you have to actually monitor to see if people are following the rules. And fifth, and this is the big one, you have to enforce it every time, consistently. Because without enforcement, an AUP is totally worthless. All right, let's do a quick recap of how we built our organizational shield. We started with the foundation, right? Awareness and culture. Then we designed a program that focused on consequences, used a bunch of different tools, and was constantly being measured. We hammered home that critical difference between training, which teaches the how, and awareness, which is all about the what. We saw why training has to be customized for different roles. And finally, we put a lock on the whole thing with the AUP, the official rulebook for everyone. And that's a wrap. So I'll just leave you with one final question to think about. Now that you know all the pieces for building a shield, take a look at your own world, your job, your school. Using those metrics we talked about, how would you really measure the strength of its privacy culture? What signs would you look for? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.